If you're familiar with using Lightroom and you want to have a quick comparison to Capture One and you're apprehensive about actually using the program, I want to give you some quick tips of how to get used to Capture One with showing you how Lightroom works and where these functions are located in Capture One. So let me just show you. The first thing that we're going to talk about is by opening up Lightroom and Capture One side by side as we have here. So we have the same images. We are going to quickly go over about 10 or 11 tips. And the first one is importing. How do you import images? Well, simply put, in Lightroom, we have an import dialog box on the bottom left. Or we can go in here and import photos or videos. Secondly, to create a new catalog, you do it through File, New Catalog. In Capture One, you can either do it through File, New Catalog, or Session. And importing is also File, Import Images. Next, the shortcut is on the top left, where we have the icon for importing images. There's also another way of creating a new catalog, is this plus sign next to catalogs. So that allows you to make a new catalog or a new session, depending on whatever you prefer. The second thing is your library. The library is where the heart of the program is located, and often this is where you start with when you import images. With Lightroom, it's under the library where you see all the images that you've selected to be visible. Next, with Capture One, it's on the left-hand side as well, under Library, the first tab. And this tab here contains all of your library, similar to Lightroom as well. So we have folders, and we have the location of where they came from. And likewise, over here, we have the Capture One raw files with the Dixie Dixon images that are located here as well. Next on the list is our Develop module. So the Develop module in Lightroom contains the area where we can quickly go in and adjust anything from white balance to curves to exposure and so forth. It's sectioned horizontally, like so, and it expands vertically, so it allows you to go to the section that you want and adjust it accordingly. With Capture One, it's separated into two different tabs, but it's consolidated on the left. If you want to move this whole panel to the right, you can also do the same thing by going under View and Place Tools Right. For the sake of being accustomed to what you're using in Lightroom, now the tab is located under this first tab here, which is called the Color tab, and we have another tab for Exposure. So with Lightroom, it's all in one vertical block. But in Capture One, it's separated into two categories, for color and light, for better organization. So with Capture One, we have white balance. We have a color editor that Lightroom doesn't have. The same thing with color balance. Black and white is there as well in Lightroom. And under the Exposure tab, we have our histogram, our exposure, rescuing details, levels, curves, clarity, and so forth. In Lightroom, we have white balance, exposure, contrast, the details, clarity, and then you have your curves and so forth. So they have it sectioned off where Capture One is in two columns, where Lightroom is only in one. Next on our list is collections. If you use collections a lot to organize your files, under Library, you'll see that they have collections right under folders. The same thing is apparent with our program here, where under Library, we have user collections that we've added a few for example purposes, as well as smart collections by simply adding one with the user collection subcontext. The same thing happens in Lightroom is you can check create collection or smart collection. Next in line and related to is ratings. How to rate your images. In Lightroom, you can click on the image that you want, use the number pad from 0 to 5, and it rates the images. The same thing in Capture One. Once you click on the images, you can rate them from 0 to 5, and it rates the images. As well as color tags. You can click under the image, assign a color tag, and go from there. Or better yet, you can even look for the shortcut for the color tags. So under adjustment, you'll see color tag, either red, yellow, green, so forth, which can also be adjustable, as opposed to Lightroom, where you're stuck using the color tag shortcuts that are pretty much set in stone. And the color tags here are located on the right-hand side, where it's red, yellow, green, blue, and purple. What about undoing and redoing changes? Now that we know where the changes are located, and I'm going to move this column back to the left-hand side, place tools left. If I do any adjustment in Capture One, I can simply either hit undo all, or if I hit Command Z, it goes back one step, and I can undo changes just for that specific editor. So this color balance editor will undo and keep everything else identical. With Lightroom, under the Develop module, I can turn them on or off. So in case I do any adjustment here, let's say I bring up my highlights and I want to turn it off, I can turn off here and turn it back on with a switch. Next, I can also reset, which will reset all my changes that I've done in Lightroom. Now let's say we want to create a virtual copy in Capture One. In Capture One, they are called variants instead of virtual copies, which do pretty much the exact same thing. So if I feel like I want to create a virtual copy, in a sense that allows me to add an edit to a photo and also keep the original as a side, in Capture One, I can simply right-click and clone variant, and it adds the virtual copy, which has done the same thing in Lightroom as well. But instead, over here, it's located in the middle when you right-click, virtual copy. A big, I guess you could say, deterrent with Lightroom to Capture One transitioning is getting used to different view modes. Well, here's one of the big differences. In Lightroom, even though we have a thumbnail view here, you can double click on it and it pops up with a full view. And the buttons are located here. You've got your overall thumbnail view, and you've got your primary view with your film strip located at the bottom. Well, the difference is with Capture One, it's a little bit more integrated. For instance, if I feel like only looking at my thumbnails, I can go into Viewer, and there are a few options that we have. So we've already talked about placing tools to the right, and the same thing happens when we place browser to the right. So it takes our film strip and makes it vertical. So that's one option that I can do for different viewing methods. Another thing that I could do is I can take the main display here, which is what our main selection is, and go under Viewer and hide Viewer. So if I hide Viewer, you notice that I only get the thumbnails. So if I go back and I say Show Viewer, I get the list as well as the viewer. I can even have the best of both worlds. I can expand this, I can change the view to grid, I can have my grid and my viewer together. So there's a host of options, and you can see how much more integrated the system is, where you dictate exactly how big your thumbnails are, as well as how big the viewer is, or even if you want it there or not. Maybe you don't even want your thumbnails there. You can simply go into Viewer, or View, I should say, and hide Browser. And Command B is your shortcut, so you can hide it. And Option Command V hides my main version right here. So you can get a really clean and customized look in Capture One. Next is exporting images. Let's say that I definitely want to export one of these images to at least out of the program. In Capture One, there are a few ways to do it. You can right click and say export and variant, and that generates a dialog prompt that we went over previously. In Lightroom, you can right click and export, and it generates it accordingly here. But also in Capture One, we have export recipes. So under the process recipes section, you can dictate exactly what you want to export it as, if in case you already know. And then once you have a recipe set, come up top here and hit this gear icon. Then it generates whatever setting you have. So it's an export preset in a sense. Speaking of presets, Lightroom and Capture One also do presets, but Lightroom is under the Develop tab, and if we select an image, the presets are located right here under the viewer. If you hover over them, they give you a little preview, which show you different filters, and these are all the basic ones that came with the program. In Capture One, we have an entire tab for styles and presets. The ones that are stock come under here, and you can either do the styles library where there's stuff that we've done, or built-in ones, which are stock ones. And the other difference is it gives us a larger preview in the middle. And then when I hit OK, it loads it. Creating them is very easy too. With Lightroom, all you need to do is hit preset and just save whatever you've done. In Capture One, you just hit the plus sign as well, and it saves whatever you've done as well. And finally, copying and pasting. If you do an adjustment in Capture One, if I bring my exposure up, and I want to copy this change to another image, I'll come up top here and hit copy adjustment. I'll come to another image, and I'll hit paste adjustment. In Lightroom, if I do any adjustment that I want to copy over, say that I bring up a curve, I'll copy it here, I'll copy that, and then I will paste it. So it copies and pastes settings. And finally, one advantage that Lightroom doesn't have yet is editable keyboard shortcuts straight out of the program. So in Capture One, I can go under Edit Keyboard Shortcuts, and anything that you want to edit is under this option here to make your workflow much more expedited. So when we took a look at all of these options that Lightroom had, it makes sense that it's easily locatable in Capture One. And the good news is that you don't have to be worried about transitioning over, because everything that you're so used to in the program is all there for you. It's just in a different location. But having it explained in a very simplistic view makes a transition much easier to get accustomed to. So that wraps up our Lightroom to Capture One quick comparisons.